Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 446 of CryptoBiography, and I'm calling this one Wrapping Up. So, I was going to call it Wrapping Up 2025 and have a sort of, look back on what I wrote in that year. Well, actually, I was hoping to have a story written, but because we were still on vacation until almost halfway through the week, I just didn't have the time to write it. So when I was thinking about it, it was like, okay, I should probably look back on 2025, see what we wrote, see what grabs me about those stories and so on, and and make that an episode. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I mean, there's some, I'm pretty happy with some of the stories that I wrote. But I think I'm probably going to at the very least, take a break from CryptoBiography and probably at least, we can probably just call this the end. I'm a little sad about it, but unfortunately, there's not really much of anyone watching or listening. The numbers have been very, very low for quite a while. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, fiction podcasts are kind of a tough sell anyway. I also made it tough on myself because when I launched it, it had some pretty good numbers because back in episode 1 and whatever, I was doing the Utini cast, and we had a pretty good audience over there, and so a bunch of people were nice enough to come check out CryptoBiography because I did mention it a couple. I try not to overdo it on the Utinacast because the Utinacast is a separate thing. But I mentioned it a few times, and especially when the first episode was coming up, and people were nice enough to check it out. And at the first, it was not a fiction podcast. It was a podcast about interviewing people and learning about their lives, and I had a lot of fun doing that for a while. The problem was because it never really took off. It was like it got some interest. It had a few hundreds of views per episode at first, but then it started to just trail off. So what was going to have happened in order for that to work was, the audience would have to take off in such a way that I could then, elicit more interest, get interviews with other people and so on. But unfortunately, that just did not happen. I mean, and I only have myself to blame. I'm not blaming anyone else. There's really no one else to blame, actually. I mean, I am literally the owner, editor, a narrator, all that stuff of the show, even, back in the day. So, anyway, but I really enjoyed talking with people. But unfortunately, because the audience wasn't there, I wasn't able to, like, when I was reaching out to people to maybe see if I could do, an episode with them, a lot of times it just wasn't happening. I just wasn't getting any response, which I guess it makes sense, because if the podcast is pretty small, then there's not a lot of, incentive for people to do an episode, really. And so I was able to sort of struggle along and get occasional episodes with people about their lives, just people I knew, people I met along the way, and stuff like that. Just keeping my ears open, stuff like that. But it just, eventually that just sort of stopped happening. And so I changed it into a fiction podcast. And I was filling in with a bunch of other types of episodes as well, but we don't need to go into that. But anyway, we changed it to a fiction episode. I think it was around episode 63, something like that. And so the idea was that forces me to write every week, put out something, and then hopefully people would enjoy it and like it, and I would find that would give me a reason to write. Because one thing I've always found during the course of my life, because I did some writing, like even like in high school, on my own, a little, spottily, a little occasionally, but I was doing some writing. And then in college, I did English with a creative writing emphasis. So I did, a lot of literature and a lot of, but creative writing was an emphasis. So I took multiple classes on creative writing, and wrote. One was about playwriting. There's a couple of poetry writing, bunch, several sort of story ones. So did a fair bit of writing for that as well. And then after college, I found that I just wasn't writing that much. Like I wanted to write, on some level, but without sort of like something to like push me along, I just wasn't writing that much. So the couple of times that I actually got a bunch of writing done, what I did is I had someone, this happened a couple of times. One was my wife and one was a friend. And for a period of time, I would say, okay, I'm going to write every, something. And then every week, I think it was every week in both cases, I would send them, what I wrote for them to read. And it almost didn't matter whether they read it or not, really. Just the promise and knowing that they expected to receive it was enough for me to write it. And so I wrote like a sort of a novel that was around. I actually wrote two novels. One was in the late 90s. One was in there, like, I think it was around 2000. And both of those were using my wife. And then later on, I did another period of writing that was with a friend of mine, using the friend of mine to expect the writing. And both my wife and this friend, this is a long time ago, so this is my first wife I'm talking about. But anyway, sometimes they would read it, and sometimes, a lot of times they wouldn't. But it didn't matter because, like I said, is the mere promise of, making the promise that, hey, I'm going to do this every week was enough to keep me sort of on it. Like that's all it takes, and so that's why one of the things I liked about doing this as a fiction podcast is because it forced me to write, and that has kept me going for a long time. So we wrote a bunch of stories. We got the situational awareness stories. There's several of those. We did some sort of fantasy stories like The Herd in the Army, modern sort of fantasies as well. I do a lot of stories that have sort of like either a sort of vaguely sort of mildly horror. Some of them are a little cosmic horror. Some of them are a little sort of weird fiction. And I like writing all that kind of stuff. But I have noticed that over like the last year especially, I've been finding it harder and harder to write a reasonable amount. The amount of actual like pages, so every year I make a new like document, and I just keep writing on that document through the year, and then I make a new one next year. And this 2025's was like almost 50% smaller than like the other years. I've just been finding it harder and harder to sort of force myself to write, even with CryptoBiography as the sort of the promise and the incentive to do so. And I have I have an idea for a story. I even started a little bit to write it, but yeah, I'm just not, with my heart not in it. I'm finding it hard to continue on. So I think I am going to stop. I don't know what else to do right now with it, because and it kind of hurts. Like I was really, I was really hoping that this would help me write more, which of course it did, more than not writing at all, of course. But I was also hoping it would make me feel like I was writing better things or coming up with more interesting ideas, or and I haven't really been feeling that I've been progressing very well. Um, I wish I were, but I don't feel that. Um, yeah, and I don't. I almost don't want to say this next part because it makes me seem, I don't know. It's hard to. Um, like the numbers have not been good. Like they kind of fell off over the first episodes. Even before I got to episode 63 and turned it into a fiction podcast, the numbers had gotten very low. So when it changed to a fiction podcast, I had maybe a slight hope that would go back up and that like it would sort of find its audience or whatever. That just never happened. And so for a long time now, I've been writing these stories and just getting absolutely no comments on the YouTube versions, emails, replies on Blue Sky. Sorry about that. I allowed myself to get distracted and I wanged my keyboard with my little stone thing here that I've got here. Anyway, and I'm not saying I have to, have smoke blown up my ass about how I'm writing or, whatever. But just the fact that no one, for a good, it's been over a year now, I believe, since anyone said anything about the writing at all. Like even negative stuff. No one's even noticed, basically. While in some ways that should not matter, in a lot of ways it should not matter. Like I said, the mere promise of me putting out the episodes is enough to keep me writing. But at some point, it just hasn't been enough. Just that has sort of like run dry, and just my interest in doing it has waned. So, yeah, this is already longer than it needs to be, and I'm sorry about that. If you do happen to hear this, I don't know who's going to actually listen to this one. So what's the plan? Well, I'm still going to be streaming, mostly SWTOR. That's just a sort of fun thing that I can do, and it's not very difficult, and I rather enjoy it. And I actually have a bit of an audience for that. Not a huge one, but, I'm happy with it. And as far as the writing goes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm going to fill that time with. I think there are a few things that I've been wanting to do that I've been not doing a good job of. I've been trying to learn French, for example, and maybe with because the thing is, even though I'm only writing a few pages a week, it takes a lot of sort of mental energy to even try to do that. It takes about the same amount of time and energy, whether it was because for a long time I was writing about 6 pages per week, because I wanted the length, the episodes to be a certain sort of length. About if I do 6 pages, it's about like an 8-minute episode. It's been sort of slowly dwindling down, and now it's like I can't really get it to over 4 in most weeks, 4 pages per episode, which is why a lot of the episodes have been about 5 minutes. So, man, this hurts. So I'd love to feel like I can sort of like just kind of push on and just continue, and then maybe it'll get better later on, or I'll come up with stories that I really want to say, really want to write. I don't know though. I've wanted to learn French, so maybe I'll learn some French. At one point, a few years ago, when I turned 50, I bought a guitar because I've wanted to learn the guitar for a long time. I tried to get some lessons, but they sort of fell apart. The person I was taking lessons from stopped giving lessons, and it was a whole thing. So maybe I could take lessons again. I don't know. So there are things I can do with that time. Anyway, like I said, but whether I was writing 6 pages or 4 pages, the sort of time it took and the amount of effort, mental effort it took, was roughly the same. Like, even though I wasn't technically writing, like words were not being put on the page, there was like a lot of mental effort being spent in just trying to push through. Obviously a lot of allowing myself to get distracted and whatever, because obviously if you're not writing, if the cursor's not moving on the screen, then you're not, you're doing something else. So I was letting myself get distracted by 100,000 things, and yet in the back of my mind I'm always thinking about it. It's like, we need to get some writing done tonight. We need to get some writing done tonight. So a lot of mental effort not being very efficiently spent. So I think if I felt that it would be missed, it would be more interesting. But that's not the ideal one. Ideally, like, I would have a little bit more of a spark. Yes, like having the promise to write so that you do write. And I honestly do feel that that's like really important, especially to someone like me who, like, it doesn't come naturally to sort of sit down in front of the keyboard and write every day. I think it's actually a really good way to force myself to write at least a reasonable amount. Maybe not enough, but a reasonable amount. By just sort of having this promise that every week I'm going to deliver XYZ, and that, is a good way to sort of get myself writing a little bit. But now that we've done it, a number of years, and right now I feel like, I'm having a hard time coming up with stories. I'm having a hard time connecting to my stories the way I was. Like I say, I'm reasonably happy with the stories that I put out, but it's been a while since I wrote in a way that really flowed and really felt like I was, writing something that I wanted to write. When I did, there was a little bit of The Herd in the Army that got written like that, a little bit of The Spotter, and a little bit of Vampire Republic. But that's only a couple of writing sessions over, that's like half a year basically of stories there. So I think what I'm going to be doing is considering like what I want to be doing with my extra time. Because I tell you, like, it's crazy how inefficient, my writing time has been. Like, it's, Sunday and Mondays I've been doing evening streams, so I kind of set those aside, kind of for the last year or so. And so, Tuesday through Saturday was supposed to be writing evenings, essentially. Obviously, if I had an actual thing, like doing something with family or whatever, but that almost never happened because my wife goes to bed early because she has early shifts and stuff. So Tuesday through Saturdays evenings were supposed to be for writing, essentially, or at least, it didn't have to be even the whole evening. It could just be, some of the time. And but it ended up eating almost all of every evening, with very little getting actually written or accomplished. And, and it just doesn't feel good anymore. So what am I going to do? Well, like I said, I might try to go back to learning some French or learning guitar just on my own. Obviously, I wouldn't do this as a podcast or anything. I probably wouldn't stream it either. I guess I could stream it, but it's like, well, what's the point? I have been sort of starting to learn chess, which is something that I did as a kid, and sort of, off and on, sort of, picked away at a couple times over the years. I don't know if how serious I want to get about it, but it's it's a pretty interesting game, pretty interesting hobby. Yeah, maybe think about writing again. Like, I'm not saying I will never write again. I'm not even saying 100% that I won't ever put out a cryptobiography episode again. Um, but doing it every week just doesn't feel good anymore. So I think I'm going to have to call it good on cryptobiography for now, unfortunately. Um, Here's probably where I would say I'm going to miss it or whatever, but unfortunately I'm not. The process has gotten too uncomfortable and not rewarding feeling enough, essentially. Um, I really would like to do writing that I'm happy with and that I'm, more proud of. And maybe if I step away for a little while and take a break, that'll be enough and I can come back to it. If that happens, I'm not sure how I do that. The website should be up for a while. I think I'm kind of doing this, rather spontaneously. So I haven't actually even done any research or anything. I'm not sure when like the next re-up on the website is. But I'm not planning on taking it down right away. So it'll probably be up for a while. As far as I know, the YouTube channel is essentially forever. Like, I don't see YouTube going away, and they don't cancel channels just because they don't get very many views or anything. You know, and I'm not planning on like turning it off, which I guess you can do, but I'm not going to. Anyway, yeah. So I'll keep my eyes open for like the next week or two. I'll try to check on the cryptography uh, Blue Sky page and the email and stuff like that. So if you want to get a hold of me in the next couple of weeks, I'd love to hear from you. I'm not anticipating it, but it would be nice. Um, if if you did like some of my stories or maybe you liked, the situational awareness ones, or you liked uh, like the ones about superhero type abilities in the modern age, or the mythological ones, like the meeting in the wilderness or the herd in the army, or a few of the others, or if you like the Twilight Zoney or weird fiction ones. I mean, it'd be nice to get some sort of feedback. I still can't promise that would bring me back right away, and I don't want to promise that. But it would be nice. CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook. Well, actually, that's maybe not the best way because I rarely check that anyway. It's been really quiet over there. Although if you do, it usually will show up on I get a little notice. Even if I'm on my other account, it'll kind of show up as little, tickler on the other account. Anyway, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Blue Sky. My Twitter's been, I exited Twitter a long time ago. I still don't like it. It's pretty awful. And thanks for listening. Words of Music copyright 2026, which is ironic because this is the first time I've said it and it'll probably be the last. So Words of Music copyright 2026, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. And although this isn't a fiction episode, we'll just say it anyway. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.